Today, we're diving into the most insane criminal fortunes in human history. Wealth so staggering, it makes Elon Musk's fortune look like pocket change. We're talking about individuals who didn't just break the law, they broke the very concept of money itself. Jeff Bezos is worth around $170 billion. That's cute. The criminal you're about to meet at number one accumulated wealth that would make today's tech billionaires weep with envy. We're entering a realm where the numbers become so large they stop making sense, where criminals generated more daily revenue than most countries produce in a year. Buckle up, because we're about to explore fortunes so vast they redefined what it means to be rich and discover why every single one of these criminal masterminds died broke, betrayed, or behind bars. Let's count down the 5 richest criminals who ever lived. Number 5, Meyer Lansky, the accountant who laundered America, $600 million. Meyer Lansky didn't look like a criminal mastermind. He looked like your neighborhood accountant, which was exactly the point. While other gangsters were getting their faces splashed across newspapers, Lansky was building something far more dangerous, a financial empire that would outlast them all. Lansky's peak wealth of $600 million in today's money doesn't just represent numbers on a page. It represents the moment organized crime learned to dress in a 3-piece suit and speak the language of legitimate business. While Al Capone was getting arrested for tax evasion, Lansky was inventing tax evasion. He created the first offshore banking networks, the first shell companies, the first systematic money laundering operations. He didn't just steal money, he made stolen money disappear and reappear as legitimate wealth. The Cuban casinos were his masterpiece. Imagine walking into the most luxurious establishments in Havana, watching wealthy Americans lose fortunes at rigged tables, while every dollar flowed through a system so sophisticated that even the government officials taking bribes didn't fully understand how they were being paid. Lansky generated over $100 million annually from Cuba alone. That's over $1 billion in today's money every single year, from what appeared to be legitimate gambling operations. The profits were so enormous that he was essentially printing money, except his printing press was human greed and mathematical precision. When the FBI finally tried to nail Lansky, they discovered something terrifying. His financial networks were so complex, so internationally dispersed, that even after decades of investigation, they could only prove a fraction of his wealth existed. Number 4, Griselda Blanco, the godmother who invented modern drug trafficking. $2 billion. Before there was Pablo Escobar, before El Chapo became a household name, there was a woman who literally wrote the playbook for international drug trafficking. Griselda Blanco didn't just participate in the cocaine trade, she created it. Picture Miami in 1975, palm trees, Art Deco hotels, and a petite Colombian woman who was about to turn America's party capital into a war zone while accumulating wealth that would make her one of the richest women on earth. Blanco's $2 billion fortune came from revolutionizing an industry that barely existed when she entered it. She didn't inherit a criminal empire or join an existing organization. She built the entire modern drug trafficking infrastructure from scratch, starting as a teenage street criminal and transforming into the architect of globalized narcotics distribution. The numbers from her operation sound like science fiction. 3,400 pounds of cocaine per month. Every month. For years. To visualize this, imagine 1.7 tons of pure white powder moving through custom-designed luggage hidden in shoes, sewn into lingerie carried by an army of well-dressed smugglers who looked like business travelers. At wholesale prices of $35,000 per kilogram, Blanco's organization was generating over $100 million monthly. That's more than most Fortune 500 companies earn in a year. Generated by a woman who learned to read by studying shipping manifests and customs documents. Here's the part that should terrify you. Law enforcement estimates her organization killed over 200 people, turning Miami into America's murder capital. Each of those deaths represented someone who got in the way of billion-dollar profit margins. Number 3, Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the CEO who flew above the law, $25 billion. Imagine looking up at a Boeing 727 commercial airliner passing overhead, knowing that instead of passengers, it's carrying 15 tons of pure cocaine and generating more profit per flight than most companies make in a decade. Welcome to the empire of Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the Lord of the Skies, whose $25 billion fortune came from transforming drug trafficking from a ground-based smuggling operation into a sophisticated aviation enterprise that would make FedEx executives jealous. Carrillo didn't just move drugs, he revolutionized an entire industry by recognizing that the sky was the ultimate unregulated highway. While other cartels were playing cat and mouse with border agents, Carrillo was flying over them at 30,000 feet, moving industrial quantities of cocaine with the efficiency of a commercial airline. The mathematics of his operation were staggering. Each Boeing 727 could carry 10 to 15 tons of cocaine. At wholesale prices of $25,000 per kilogram, every fully loaded flight represented $250 to $375 million in revenue. His organization operated multiple flights weekly, generating more monthly revenue than companies like Netflix or Nike produce annually. The fleet itself was massive, over 30 commercial aircraft, including Boeing 727s, DC-9s, and various cargo planes. This wasn't a smuggling operation, it was a private airline dedicated to moving illegal cargo. The operational costs alone, aircraft purchases, maintenance, fuel, pilot salaries, hangar facilities, exceeded $100 million annually. But the return on investment was astronomical. The corruption required to maintain this empire was systematic and international. Carrillo didn't just bribe individual officials, he corrupted entire institutions. Government agencies became so dependent on his payments that they essentially functioned as subsidiaries of his organization. The monthly corruption budget exceeded $50 million, but this represented a small fraction of revenue from an operation generating $200 million weekly. When Carrillo died in 1997 during plastic surgery to change his appearance, investigators discovered the true scope of his empire. Financial records showed assets worth $25 billion across multiple countries, but experts believe this represented only the wealth they could trace. Number 2. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the escape artist who built underground empires, $14 billion. The tunnel was a masterpiece of criminal engineering, over a mile long, complete with ventilation systems, electric lighting, and a motorcycle rail system for moving drugs. It cost $1.5 million to build and generated over $1 billion in revenue before law enforcement discovered it. But this wasn't just any tunnel, it was the signature of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, whose $14 billion fortune came from literally going underground to build the most sophisticated smuggling network in criminal history. Guzman's wealth places him among the richest people who ever lived, criminal or otherwise. Forbes didn't just estimate his net worth. They ranked him among the world's most powerful people for multiple years running. His criminal empire generated more annual revenue than Tesla, Twitter, or American Airlines. The Sinaloa cartel under Guzman's leadership became the ultimate criminal multinational corporation, controlling 40 to 60% of all illegal drugs entering the United States. But cocaine was just one product line. They diversified into heroin, methamphetamine, and eventually fentanyl, creating multiple billion-dollar revenue streams that functioned like a drug conglomerate. The tunnel network that made Guzman famous represented just one component of a logistics empire that would impress Amazon executives. His organization operated fleets of aircraft, including jets, helicopters, and cargo planes. They controlled shipping networks with vessels ranging from fishing boats to cargo ships. They even developed primitive submarines capable of carrying multi-ton drug shipments across international waters. The geographic scope was truly global. While based in Mexico, Guzman's network extended into Colombia, the United States, Canada, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Each new market required enormous upfront investment in corruption, infrastructure, and personnel. But once established, these international operations generated billions in additional annual revenue. The corruption budget alone was astronomical, over $100 million annually to Mexican officials, with additional payments to authorities in dozens of other countries. Some government employees received monthly payments exceeding their official salaries, creating a parallel government funded by drug money. The scale of cash handling became a logistical nightmare. Guzman's organization employed dedicated currency counting teams, invested in industrial money counting equipment, and maintained warehouses specifically for cash storage. Some safe houses contained rooms filled floor to ceiling with bundled currency, representing more liquid wealth than most banks maintain in their vaults. Number 1. Pablo Escobar, the king who made countries kneel, $70 billion. December 2, 1993. Colombian National Police surround a modest house in Medellin. Inside, the world's richest criminal makes a phone call to his son. "I love you," he says, then steps onto the roof where bullets end the life of a man who once offered to pay off Colombia's entire national debt. Pablo Escobar didn't just accumulate wealth, he redefined what wealth meant. His $70 billion fortune represents the largest criminal accumulation of money in human history. Wealth so vast, it broke the mathematical models law enforcement used to understand organized crime. To comprehend Escobar's fortune, you need to understand that at his peak, the Medellin cartel controlled 80% of the global cocaine market. Not 80% of Colombian cocaine. Not 80% of South American cocaine, 80% of all cocaine consumed on Earth. The daily numbers read like economic science fiction. $60 million in revenue every single day. That's $420 million weekly, over $22 billion annually. To put this in perspective, Escobar's daily income exceeded what most people earn in multiple lifetimes. But these aren't theoretical calculations. The DEA documented that Escobar's organization spent $2,500 monthly just on rubber bands to organize currency bundles. Think about the operational scale required where organizing cash becomes a significant business expense. They employed teams whose only job was counting and bundling money. They lost approximately 10% of their cash reserves annually to rats, water damage, and simple misplacement because they generated currency faster than they could properly store it. The logistics were incomprehensible. Moving 15 tons of cocaine daily required infrastructure that rivaled multinational corporations. Aircraft fleets with over 100 planes, shipping networks spanning multiple oceans, ground transportation systems crossing entire continents, and processing facilities that operated like pharmaceutical manufacturing plants. Escobar employed over 40,000 people directly, making his organization larger than most legitimate corporations. His payroll included pilots, chemists, accountants, lawyers, security specialists, logistics coordinators, and thousands of foot soldiers. The monthly payroll exceeded $50 million, but this represented a tiny fraction of revenue from an operation generating billions quarterly. The security apparatus alone cost over $100 million annually and was better equipped than many national militaries. Private armies with military-grade weapons, intelligence networks that infiltrated law enforcement agencies, and early warning systems that detected government operations before they launched. Escobar didn't just evade law enforcement. He often knew about police raids before the officers conducting them. The corruption required to maintain this empire was systematic and reached the highest levels of government worldwide. Escobar's famous plata o plomo, silver or lead philosophy, wasn't just a slogan, it was a business model. His corruption budget exceeded $500 million annually and included payments to thousands of officials across dozens of countries. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of Escobar's empire was its economic impact beyond the criminal organization itself. His wealth affected currency exchange rates in multiple countries, inflated real estate markets wherever he invested, and created boom and bust cycles in rural Colombian communities. His organization's cash injections into local economies were so massive, they distorted entire regional markets. When numbers stop making sense, let's pause and absorb what we've just explored. These 5 criminals accumulated a combined $112 billion through illegal means. To put this in perspective, this represents more wealth than the annual GDP of most countries on Earth. But the raw numbers only tell part of the story. What we've really examined is how unlimited greed, combined with the profit margins available in illegal markets, can generate wealth accumulation that defies comprehension. These weren't just criminals, they were economic forces that distorted entire markets and corrupted institutional systems across multiple countries. The velocity of wealth generation in these criminal enterprises often exceeded that of the fastest-growing legitimate businesses by orders of magnitude. Where legitimate billionaires build wealth over decades, these criminals accumulated fortunes in years. The profit margins available in illegal markets, combined with the willingness to use violence and corruption, created wealth accumulation engines that operated outside normal economic constraints. But perhaps most remarkably, these criminals often accumulated wealth faster than they could effectively manage or spend it. The logistical challenges of handling enormous cash volumes became genuine operational problems requiring dedicated infrastructure just for currency management. The real legacy. Today, 30 years after Escobar's death, law enforcement agencies continue finding assets hidden by these criminal organizations. Swiss bank accounts opened decades ago occasionally surface during investigations. Real estate purchased with criminal proceeds continues to be identified and seized. The financial networks they created were so complex that unraveling them completely may be impossible. But their true legacy isn't hidden wealth. It's the techniques they developed that continue spreading throughout the criminal underworld. Modern drug cartels use methods pioneered by Escobar and refined by subsequent generations. Money laundering strategies developed by Lansky have been adapted for cybercrime and international terrorism financing. The cat-and-mouse game between criminal innovation and law enforcement response continues, with each side adapting to the other's latest techniques. Every major criminal organization today uses some variation of methods developed by the criminals we've examined. However, law enforcement has also evolved. The financial investigation techniques developed to combat these criminal empires are now standard tools used against modern organized crime, terrorism financing, and international corruption. The regulatory frameworks created to combat criminal wealth, anti-money laundering laws, financial reporting requirements, international cooperation agreements, now form the backbone of modern financial crime prevention. The most important lesson from these stories isn't about the scale of criminal wealth, but about its ultimate futility. Despite accumulating fortunes that rivaled nations, every one of these criminals ended up dead, imprisoned, or living in constant fear. Their wealth couldn't buy happiness, security, or redemption. These stories serve as stark reminders that no amount of wealth can compensate for the fundamental emptiness of a life built on destroying others. The billions they accumulated ultimately meant nothing when weighed against the human cost of their actions. While the numbers are staggering and the scope impressive, the ultimate message is clear. Criminal wealth is built on a foundation of destruction that eventually consumes everything, including those who create it. These stories are examined for their historical significance and educational value, highlighting both the scale of criminal operations and their devastating impact on society. Crime destroys lives, communities, and ultimately those who pursue it. True success comes from building rather than destroying, creating rather than taking, and serving rather than exploiting.